back to another video from SkiBoatPartsOnline.com. My name is Ron, and today we're going to tackle replacing a bad velvet drive transmission in an older ski boat with a new ZF 1-to-1 gear. Well, I think this is where we left off in part one. All of the removal portion has been done. Now we're going to do the installation of the new ZF gear. All right, these replacement damper plates have multiple holes in them for various flywheels. So it's going to take a minute to get the right one configured. But if you're going to go on this hole on this ear, it must be the same hole on this ear and this ear. Each hole in the same ear must be used. You can't use one hole on this ear and a different hole on that ear. It won't work. So you have to use, and it'll just take a minute to figure out which hole it is. Once you find out which hole you're going to use, I like to take a Sharpie and just kind of mark that, because I'm going to take this back off. Clean those holes. It'll make it quicker when I go to put it back together. I know which one it is. Now the replacements also use 3 bolts instead of the 6, which is perfectly fine. That's what the Chevrolets use. But the 6 bolts that I took out, 3 of them I took over and cleaned the threads up with the wire wheel and inspected. These are all grade 5 bolts coming out of here. So the old bolts are ready to reuse. They're in good shape. I want to take and blow out any residual crud. Alright, that's ready to go. New damper's ready to go. Now, it's important and critical that you use thread lock on these bolts. So make sure you put thread lock on there. I already know which hole I'm going in because I marked it. And we'll go ahead and get this one started. And let's see here. There we go. Thread lock on this one, again through the marked hole. We've already verified that we don't need to trim the damper because it's flush with the end of the ring gear. Some of these you have to trim back with a grinder. Okay, we can buzz those in and then we're going to torque them. Okay, torque on these is 15 to 18 pounds. I'll write that down. There's 10. We'll go to 18. That one's good. Good. Okay, now we're going to go all the way up to 18 pounds. Okay, flywheel dampener is in. Bolts have locked tight and they're tightened down. The last thing I'm going to do is we're going to put a little self-etching primer. Oh, there we go. On the steel parts. Kind of chilly in the shop, trying to get this ball to shake. Come on, there we go. Okay, now we're ready to start reassembling things. The flywheel, or the cover, I'm going to go ahead and take that out of the boat, clean up all the surfaces. We're going to put a little new caulk around there because this one was caulked, so I'm going to go ahead and take that out now and clean those surfaces up. Okay, I've got the new ZF replacement gear and the Borg-Warner Velvet Drive gear side by side. There are some minor differences between the two, although it is still considered a direct bolt-up replacement. The first thing I'll do, I'll just prove a point. If you put a straight edge against the mounting surface of the ZF gear and the mounting surface of the Velvet Drive gear, I've got these straight across. I'll move my straight edge to the output flange, and you can't see that, so let me move the camera. Okay, I haven't moved the gearboxes. I've got my straight edge, and the output flange is the same between the two gears. Okay, a couple key differences between the Borg Velvet Drive 1:1 and the ZF 45C 1:1. Of course, your oil line fittings have been transferred from the old gearbox to the new one. They're in slightly different locations, but it's not a big deal. The top one I've left loose for now. I'll tighten it once I get it mounted in the boat to make sure my hose line is exactly where I want it before I tighten it. I have covered them up to keep any debris from going in. When I took the fittings off of the old gear, I took compressed air, blew out the fittings so they're nice and clean. We'll also blow out the oil cooler because we're reusing that. The transmission neutral safety switch on the ZF is right here on the top. On the Borg-Warner, it was on the side. Very little difference in location. Your wire harness will reach that with no problem, so that's no big deal. This is the vent fitting on the Borg, and this is the vent fitting on the ZF. Again, no big deal. The other big difference between the shift arm location is the actual bolting. They use the same bell housing bolt pattern. The Velvet Drive used 2 studs at the bottom and then 4 bolts to attach it. The ZF is going to use 4 studs and 2 bolts. And to help you from having to run around town looking for the hardware kit, we at SkiBoatPartsOnline includes the hardware kit with the 4 studs and 2 bolts to install the ZF gear in place of the Borg-Warner Velvet Drive. So this transmission looks like he's about ready to go in the boat. Remember, we're going to make sure we put plenty of grease on the splines before we put it in, but this guy is ready to go in. Okay, after cleaning up the bell housing, getting ready to reinstall it, you're going to want to use some oil-resistant black RTV to apply to the lower half of the bell housing. This is where it contacts the sheet metal dust plate to help seal that up. It's a good idea to grind the surface around the bolt hole where your ground cable is going to attach to assure a good grounding surface. Okay, our bell housing is reinstalled. The small bolts that hold the dust cover on the back side underneath have been reinstalled. The dust pan or dust cover is installed, and the starter motor is reinstalled, just the opposite of how we took it off. So now we're ready to put the new studs in. The new studs go in the bottom 2 holes and the top 2 holes, and be sure to use thread lock when you install the new studs. 4 studs installed. Now we're about ready to put that new gear in. Make sure there's no paint on the output flange of the transmission. I like to take some sandpaper and make sure that surface is really clean for alignment purposes later on. Smear a nice bit of spline grease on the splines of the input shaft of the transmission next. Okay, we have plenty of grease on the splines and grease on the splines in the dampener. All 4 studs are in place and tight. The ZF gear, by the way, has a nice little lifting eye, so you don't have to use the ropes. But now we just got to lower it into place and use the 4 studs. When you get near the spline, take your output shaft and rotate it, and there she goes. She just slid right into place. Now we've got our 4 studs coming through and room for 2 bolts. I'm going to take my 2 bolts, lock washers on, get the other side. Once I get all of the bolts and studs on, the next step in this job is going to be to take the motor mounts, take them on the bench and inspect them, recondition, making sure that all of the threaded rod, make sure they're all adjustable before I bolt those back onto the transmission. So this is just a matter now of bolting it up. Here's a picture of that bolt between the upper stud and the lower stud. Transmission mounts are next. Pay attention to the mounts. They can be installed offset up or offset down. Reference when you take them off how they, or take a picture when you took them off to make sure that you put them back on the same way. Reinstall the transmission mounts to their perch. And make sure you inspect those good and rebuild them as needed. We're going to cover rebuilding these mounts in another video real soon. Alright, it's kind of crowded in the back of this boat, so I'll bring you up to speed. The transmission, I'll use my pointer, my mooring cover support pole pointer here. Transmission's been bolted back into the bell housing. Took a break from that to do some much needed maintenance on the shaft. The shaft was removed, the coupling was removed, prop was removed, the shaft was slid out the back of the boat. This particular Mastercraft does have a what I call a pass-through rudder design. The rudder is offset, so the rudder did not have to be removed to get the shaft out. That was kind of nice. But the stuffing box was removed, the old packing material was removed, and new GFO type packing was installed. Of course, then the prop was put back on. I did change the key in the prop to a brass key to save the drivetrain if there was a hard strike. Then the next thing was the alignment. Now I covered the alignment in detail in another video, so we're not going to take up time doing that here. But the motor hasn't been aligned in a long time apparently, because the shaft was riding low and to one side. And I raised the front mounts 7.5 turns from where they were. Of course, the back mounts were completely restored, so we don't really have a starting point, but they were raised accordingly. And now the gap between the two coupling halves is less than 0.0015 inches. The feeler gauge will not go in at any point around the coupling halves. So that maintenance now has all been done, so we're going to resume the transmission installation. The next thing we're going to do is take the old oil cooler lines and blow them out. Any old oil that was in there, we're going to blow those out with some compressed air. Backing up just a minute to that shaft maintenance, here's a quick picture of the shaft going through the log after the alignment was done. This is how it's supposed to look. Here are the two transmission cooler lines. I'm going to go ahead and take some compressed air and blow these out. Yeah, we got some nasty oil out of there. Okay, I'm going to blow it back the other way, just to make sure we got it all out. Kind of a messy job. There we go. Alright, you want to make sure that you blow any crud out of those lines. There's some definitely brown. Now if the oil is very milky, whitish color, then you really need to take a look at the trans oil cooler to make sure that you don't have other issues. And highly recommend replacing it if it's suspect. Now I did notice just a second ago we have a cracked fitting here. This fitting has a big old crack in it. I'll try to take the other camera and get a close-up of that for you. But that's the next hose that gets connected. So that hose is going to have to be replaced or repaired. Here's a quick close-up of the fitting that I found cracked that had to be replaced. The next issue to address was the shift cable mounting point. The original bracket is shown. We're going to take that off. We're going to cut it back so we can get it to align up better with the shift arm on the transmission. You can also adjust or change the different mounting points of the actual bracket. Okay, now we're on the final steps of finishing up this transmission replacement. Probably the most involved part is changing or adjusting the shift cable. I've already done that. What I did was I took the existing bracket that was mounted lower, I re-drilled, shortened the bracket, changed the angle, actually reduced the angle a little bit so that the cable is coming in to a nice straight line. And the way I do that, or the way I adjust it, is put the shift arm in neutral. Okay, you'll find a detent right there for neutral. Put your throttle in neutral, and you want to adjust this so you have a nice straight line with no pushing or pulling in neutral. Then what I'll do is I tested it. I take and push the throttle forward, and I see to make sure that this is still lined up. That'll tell you if you're going to use the outer hole or the inner hole. In this case we're using the outer hole. And I do the same thing for reverse. I'll put this in reverse. I'll go up to the throttle, push it in reverse to make sure the barrel still lines up with the outer hole. In this case they did. So that part is done. The hoses are all put back. One end down there had to be replaced because it was cracked. All the mounting bolts are back and tight. All the trunnion bolts are tight. The jam nuts are tight on all four mounts. The shaft has been addressed, so all we've got to do now is to a little touch-up paint. We got some paint that's off there. Sounds like I have to go answer the phone, but we'll go dress that up here in just a minute. Okay, the one thing you do not want to forget is to make sure we add ATF, good old Dextron 3 ATF, to this new gearbox. Now the ZF does hold just a hair more oil than the Borg Warner does. The book calls for like 2.1 quarts, so we're going to start with 2 quarts, but none of the dipsticks, Velvet Drive or the ZF, the dipsticks are not calibrated for the oil that's in the oil cooler and lines, because they don't know where the cooler is going to be, how big of a cooler it is, or how long the lines are. So the proper way to adjust this is after it's running and idling, pull the dipstick off while it's idling, clean the dipstick, shut the engine off, and within a second or two check the oil level before it has a chance to drain back. But we're going to go ahead and start with 2 quarts here. Put 2 quarts in, then I'm going to check it, and I'm probably going to add a half quart. And she's already showing it's above the full mark. But I know as soon as we start this, she's going to be low. We'll go ahead and add a wee bit more. I had a half a quart in this bottle, so we got about 2.5 in there now. Okay, and next is going to be the exhaust system and cleaning up. Well, the finish line was in sight, but when putting the exhaust back in the boat, we discovered a new problem that was unexpected. The vent fitting for the transmission is interfering with the bottom of the muffler. The muffler is actually pressing it against it and will not go all the way down. So, back to the drawing board. We're going to have to figure out a cure for this. Well, we came to find out that the vent fitting on the right is the new ZF vent fitting. They just started using these to cure some problems, particularly with some of the V-drive boats. The fitting on the left is the adapter fitting, the fitting that we need to put in this transmission and thread that vent into it and cure our problems. These vent fittings are available here at SkiBoatPartsOnline. Here is what the short fitting looks like installed. Now with everything installed and ready for a test, you can see that we have good clearance between the vent fitting in the bottom of the muffler, and we have good clearance with the shift cable to the bottom of the muffler. These cross flow mufflers you have to pay a little extra attention with because they can create some issues. The Velvet drives and the ZF 1-to-1s are to be checked with the engine running at idle. Pull the dipstick out, clean it. It's kind of hard to see because the muffler is kind of hiding the view here. If the engine's idling, obviously I'm going to leave the dipstick out. I'm going to go shut the engine off, and then I'm going to check it. You want to do this pretty much as quickly as you can. You don't thread it back in. You're right on the money there. That's about an 1/8 inch over full. I'm going to call that really good. I'm going to thread her back in there. Now, off camera, I had already cycled the transmission from forward to reverse a couple times. Make sure when you do that on the trailer that you spray, I use soapy water on the strut bearings. You're just going to spin the shaft for a minute. You don't want to run a dry shaft on dry bearings. Let's fire it up one more time. Put it in and out of gear. Look at my shift linkage, make sure it's clearing the muffler. Yeah, we're in good shape there. Everything's looking good. Time to clean this boat up. Well, that's going to complete our transmission swap out. Everything's put back together. Interior is back, motor box is back, center floor is back, boat is cleaned up, vacuumed up, everything's checked and double checked and ready for delivery. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have to replace your transmission, give us a call. We'll help you out. And also don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like these videos and you want to see more of them for ski boat service. Subscribe to our channel. Thank you and God bless.